Welcome back and thanks for staying with Morning Live. Now, National Security Advisor Professor Sydney Mafamadi confirmed that former Eskom CEO Ruyter did mention the names of politicians allegedly involved in corruption at Eskom during a meeting. Now, Mufamadi confirmed that he was present at a meeting that was held in Ruyter's office in July last year, where Ruyter mentioned a high-ranking office bearer. And Mufamadi said also present in that meeting were the Minister of Public Enterprises and his advisor, without mentioning their names. Now, appearing before Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts on Friday, Professor Mufamadi said that they were given a sense of perversive criminality and organised crime at play at Eskom, but that the National Security Advisor refused to repeat the names mentioned by Ruyter at the said meeting. Political analyst Dr Oscar van Heerden joins us now to talk about this a little bit more. Dr van Heerden, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers.
So let's just get straight into it. Is it acceptable for a government official or a member of the public, for that matter, to withhold such information, particularly a person employed in his capacity by government to, one could argue otherwise, strengthen governance or security to rid the country of corruption? Is it, a good thing for them to withhold this type of information? Should it even happen?
Sakina, the truth of the matter is, and I'm sure you will all agree, that the first principle in fighting corruption is indeed transparency. If we cannot be transparent, if we don't know what's happening, who's involved, then already we are going to be climbing an uphill battle in the combat against corruption. And in that light, I think that you are right. These names need to be mentioned. We need to know who are involved. But at the same time, I think the reason why there's hesitancy on the part of some, like Professor Sydney Mafamadi, is that, people can easily make allegations, which is not substantiated, evidence is not provided, and then you expose these names, which in itself is unfair towards certain individuals. And I think that perhaps therein lies the nub, that they are also wanting to make sure, just because names were mentioned in a meeting, is there indeed sufficient evidence to substantiate and back it up? And I think that's perhaps why there's some hesitancy.
So let's just unpack that a little further. So an allegation is made, and it is just that, an allegation. So what would have been the best way to deal with that? Would it be to go do an investigation and establish the veracity of the allegation? Or would it be a question of putting it out there and saying to the person against whom it is alleged, and of course the one making the allegation, to substantiate and of course to refute what is being said about them? How should this have been played, in the best interest of the public?
Well, this is, exactly, Sakina. If an employer finds officials that are corrupt, that are involved in malfeasance, the duty indeed is on those that want to accuse, to present the evidence. And so there's two things that should have happened. One, indeed, you could have an internal investigation and make those investigations and evidence available to the powers that be, and then say, we suspected this, we investigated, here's the evidence. Or if you are not able to do it internally, is to go to the necessary law enforcement agencies and say, we suspect that these individuals are involved in corruption and malfeasance. We'd like to open a case so that you can investigate and bring these people to book. In that way, we would have known who these individuals were. You also need to understand, Sakina, that, the timing of Mr. Ruyter's utterances is also what some people find bizarre. He knew about this for some time. He didn't take action. He didn't lay charges. And instead, he waits until he's about to resign, and then he drops this bomb. So people are also looking at it very skeptically.
And while that is the case, and I would imagine, as you say, given the timing of this particular disclosure by the Ruyter, there should be skepticism about that. However, it cannot be the only skepticism that arises from that, Dr. van Heerden, because isn't the minister and, of course, the advisor, Professor Mufamadi, are they not duty-bound to actually take this further? Because these are serious allegations. And in as much as the Ruyter has to be called and held, have his feet held to the fire, is it not the same for the others who knew about it?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you are being told as an official of government of wrongdoing of your colleagues, then it is incumbent on you to actually make sure that you look at the matter very closely and that you report it to the relevant structures. I mean, the president should indeed have been informed, cabinet should have been alerted, but besides that, is if there is compelling evidence to suggest wrongdoing, it is also incumbent on that individual, such as Professor Mufamadi, to then take it to the relevant law enforcement. You can't want to sweep it under the carpet. So I completely agree with you, Sakina, that you are duty bound when people report malfeasance and corruption to actually act on it.
So now we've seen playing out in Parliament, and SCOPA has really tried to get some information, more information other than what has been put on the table so far. So we saw Andre de Ruyter before SCOPA, we saw Minister Pravin Gordhan before SCOPA, there were the Hawks, there was the SIU, we also had Professor Mufamadi appear before SCOPA, and it seems as though that needle hasn't moved at all. So then the question becomes, who has the power to actually coerce, for lack of a better word in this instance, be it Professor Mufamadi, the Minister, de Ruyter, or the law enforcement agencies to actually disclose that information?
Yeah, look, I mean, the buck stops with the President of the Republic. It is his cabinet, it is ministers that he had appointed. And indeed, if there is some truth in wrongdoing and corrupt practices by one or two ministers, and no one wants to expose these names, he is duty-bound to actually call them in to say, look, this has been presented to me, this is what I think, can you explain yourself? And in the absence of a sufficient explanation, then it needs to go to law enforcement agencies to say, can you please investigate?
So, and then, of course, there's another dynamic at play as well. We saw in February, Fikile Mbalula say that the ANC was to open a case against the Ruyter and giving him 7 days at the time to reveal the names and to produce evidence of these claims of corrupt ANC leaders who are doing things at Eskom. And then it was reported the court gave the ANC the go-ahead to actually serve papers on de Ruyter in Germany, where he is now, for what it called defamation against the party. So, Dr. van Heerden, what are your views on this? And, what is likely to happen here? How is it likely to play out, given what we've already witnessed and people keeping mum at this stage?
Sakina, I think the principle about corruption allegations must be evidence. I think that is the key. Otherwise, we are going to just have people going all over, making all kinds of allegations, insinuations, and so forth, and not being able to back it up with real evidence. And so I think in this case, the courts are saying that you have made allegations, very serious ones, you've implicated certain individuals, and you must provide the evidence. It's the same with for example, the Lady R saga. It's all good and well for the US ambassador to make these allegations, but at the end of the day, you have to put evidence on the table. You cannot simply be allowed to make these wild accusations and not be able to back it up. Because if we allow a system where people just make allegations and they are not actually called to bring the evidence, then we are going to really run around in circles and tarnish people's names.
So it's the old maxim, he who alleges must prove. And again, I'm struggling to understand. And people are saying, well, perhaps Andre de Ruyter is fearful for himself, his life, and those of the people around him whom he loves and cares about. But I'm struggling with this because, on the one hand, that is a very real fear, given what we've seen play out with the likes of whistleblowers like Babita Deokaran, like Cindy Somakatka, and others. But with that said, how then are we going to move forward as a nation? Because we have rampant corruption in South Africa. And if whistleblowers are not protected, how then are we hoping to win this fight against corruption?
No, you raise a very, very good point, Sakina. And, this is a question that will haunt us for a very long time. You know that there are calls on the part of government to strengthen the issue around whistleblowers and protection for whistleblowers and so forth. But I think that still the argument does hold, even with those dangers and so forth, because that is unfortunately how you fight corruption. You have to come out, expose, and indicate who is involved, and also back it up with evidence. Because, the allegations can be how serious, and it can be against people that are very high up in government or in the private sector. But, I do think we must agree, all of us, that the principle of bringing the evidence and substantiating your allegations and claims must be a sacrosanct rule. Otherwise, we are going to have a situation where people are just using this as a ploy, as a political tool for their own benefit to bring accusations against individuals.
And that would be unfortunate if indeed that were the driving motivation behind it, Dr. van Heerden. However, is the price not too high? Should people have to pay with their lives for actually exposing corruption? And why are we not seeing greater protection for whistleblowers? Again, I spoke of Babita Deokaran and Cindy Somakatka, who unfortunately lost their lives. You've got now, in the case of Andre de Ruyter, who claims to be a whistleblower, because we haven't seen the evidence yet. So he's left, he's in Germany. You have someone like Ethel Williams, who's had to leave the country in that SARS expose. So is the price not too high for whistleblowers? Because apart from having to leave the country or losing your lives, there's also a very real danger in people getting blacklisted for blowing the whistle. So what is the motivation for anyone to actually come forward with these sort of information that they may have against others? Why would you?
Well, it's in pursuit of the truth. And it's a difficult thing. I cannot overstate the points that you are actually mentioning around the difficulty with whistleblowers, where people constantly face the threat of being killed, face the threat of their family members being intimidated and so on, because these people sometimes even say, we know where your children are studying, we know where your wife is working, and so on and so forth. So you're right, Sakina, it comes with a heavy price. And some people decide to resign and run away. Some people decide to anonymously submit information to expose. And then there are those few brave ones that obviously come out publicly as a way of also protecting themselves. To say, I know about certain wrongdoings. There are people, very powerful people involved, and I have the evidence. Because the situation, Sakina, is such that if we are going to, every time someone stands up and say there's these allegations, then the NPA or the Hawks, the SIU, and law enforcement, the police, all of them must now get involved and spend resources only to find that it was an insinuation. You thought it was the case. You were convinced it was the case, but actually it turns out that there isn't actually any evidence to back it up. And that will take months to come to that realization. So I do think that it is dangerous. Whistleblowers obviously think very carefully about these things. But when you do go public, it is best, I think, to have the necessary evidence to back up the claims.
So at this point, just as we wrap this conversation, Dr. van Heerden, the corrupt, they are watching and they can see how very slowly, painstakingly slowly, the wheels of justice are turning. It looks like they are winning the day. That's the perception that this creates. And it, of course, continues to breed a culture of more corruption. And it seems to be continuing unfettered. So is there hope for South Africa if those who are tasked with state responsibilities of fighting crime and corruption don't seem to realize that they have a duty to report the malfeasance, the corruption, and whatever wrongdoing is taking place?
You know, Sakina, I do agree with you that the wheels of justice do turn slowly. I don't think it is necessarily correct that to say that corruption is winning. I think that we have seen so many arrests over the last few years with a revamped NPA. It's not always the big fish, as we call it, but a number of people all over the country in various municipalities have been arrested, government officials, mayors, and so forth, and continues to face the long arm of the law. We know, for example, that flowing from the state capture report, there are some big fishes that are currently finding themselves in court, Esma Khashule, Gumede in eThekwini, and a few others. And we do hope that the fight against corruption will continue unabated, because it is a serious blight on the politics of the South African nation.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there for this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Political analyst Dr. Oscar van Heerden from the University of Johannesburg's Department of International Relations, discussing the gravity of a political crisis facing the country at present, where the names of those allegedly linked to serious corruption at Eskom are known, but senior office bearers in government simply refuse to reveal them even to Parliament. So you can feel free to tell us your views as well at Morning Live SABC.